So today, as we reflect on Human Rights Month, the spotlight is firmly on a fundamental right, the right to food and water. While many of us have access to these necessities, for millions in our country, it remains a daily struggle. Gauteng MEC for Agriculture and Rural Development, in a recent opinion piece in the Mail and Guardian, highlighted that South Africa produces enough food to feed its entire population, yet millions still go hungry. The challenge, she argues, lies not in the lack of food, but in the distribution, affordability, availability and accessibility. Joining us now to discuss this critical issue is the Gauteng MEC for Agriculture and Rural Development, Vuyiswa Ramokgopa, who's joining us in studio. Very good morning to you, MEC. Thank you so much for making time for us.
Good morning, Aljan. Thank you for having me.
What was it about that op-ed that you wrote that said to you, I need to write a piece that speaks about this fundamental right, the right to food?
Aljan, since I came into office now just over 8 months ago, one of the key issues that is a priority for the department is, of course, ending hunger. But it's also linked to the question around small-scale farming, urban agriculture, and how food is actually produced. And if you go further into that, you then look at the entire economy of food and start to understand better how it actually works. And I'm saying, one of the things that we've realized is that there is actually enough food. South Africa is a net exporter of food and a global player when it comes to agricultural production, technology, etc. But due to, a myriad of socioeconomic issues, unemployment being one of them, rapid urbanization being another one of them, and of course the lack of access to suitable agricultural land in dense urban areas like Gauteng, we are plagued with this rising urban hunger issue. And so that's question's been on my mind for the last few months to say, how do we better respond to this issue? We've invested a lot, for example, in subsistence farming initiatives, urban food gardens, community gardens, backyard gardens. We supported 9,000, subsistence farmers last year, but yet we don't seem to be shifting the needle on this issue. And so it really begs the question to say, how do we then come up with a much more systematic approach towards resolving the issue of food hunger, of urban hunger? And it speaks to all of those different elements, like you said, affordability, accessibility, availability, and very importantly, nutritional content, making sure that people have food, but food that's actually nutritious. I am. They have a lot to be proud of, and they've made us proud.
They've made us proud. Yeah. So joining us in studio is the MEC for Gauteng, for Agriculture and Rural Development, Vuyiswa Ramokgopa. We're discussing the issue around the impact of poverty, but more specifically when it comes to food, and also looking at the number of people that are going hungry. And the last stat that we got last year was around 9 million people in Gauteng, the household survey, 9 million people that are actually starving in this province. Yeah. And this is a contributor, biggest contributor to the country's GDP and the heartbeat of the continent's economy as well. But let's speak about the interventions, MEC. What do they look like?
Look, there are a number of things that can be done and should be done. And a lot of these are underway. And I'm really going to talk about 3 things. From my seat, from an agricultural perspective, I think there's a lot more that can be done to support and scale up small-scale farming and local food production. We need to get into the business of producing our own food and enabling people to produce food closer to where they live, so that, one, they can consume it, but also that they can start invigorating a lot of these economies that in many instances have died after some of the main industries have died off. So you've got a number of peri-urban areas in Gauteng where those economies are basically dead.
Yeah, where the mines have pulled out. The
mines have pulled out and there's no other economic activity. So we really have an opportunity to reignite some of these peri-urban areas, township areas. And there's a myth that there's no land in Gauteng. There is. Of course, it doesn't compare to our counterparts in like Limpopo and otherwise, but we do have land. But what we need to ensure we do is use that land more productively and ensure that we can get it to people who actually need it. The second thing really is about, and this is it's outside of my domain, but something that I think we need to engage is about looking at targeted social support for food. A person shouldn't have to choose between whether they are going to buy a roll-on or whether they're going to catch a taxi to go to an interview or feed themselves. A mother shouldn't have to say, to choose between eating themselves today or feeding their children and sending them to school. And I'm saying we need to actually look at targeted social support for food in the form of, food vouchers, specific subsidized product lines for food. And there are many test cases in different countries where this has been done. And I think South Africa is at that point now where we have to really engage this matter.
Is this like food stamps?
Yeah, food stamps, I mean, they've evolved now to different, actually like food vouchers, digital vouchers and such. And there's many models of this in different countries. And then the third thing is around food waste. I speak in my article that about 10 million tons of food goes to waste every year in South Africa. Now, this is food that could be feeding these 9 million people that you are talking about. But unfortunately, it's just not profitable or financially, feasible to get this food to where it needs to be. And there are a lot of NPOs and organizations that are trying to close this gap, but it's not enough. We actually need to now look at legislative mechanisms that compel producers of food or incentivize producers of food to get food, excess food to where it needs to be. And when I talk about food waste, I'm not talking about rotten food.
We're not speaking about expired
I'm not talking about expired food. I want to get that very clear. I'm talking about, those beautiful, perfect, red, shiny apples that you see at Woolies that don't even have any kind of blemish on them. Now, to get there, a number of other apples had to be rejected. They didn't meet perhaps the food standards or the aesthetic standards or whatever. And a lot of that food just ends up in landfills because it's not able to then be redistributed back into, under-resourced communities. And I'm saying a lot more needs to be done there, and legislation can actually play a part.
How does that look like? I'm just remembering now during the July 2021 unrest. There were the lootings that were taking place, and there were food as well that was being stolen essentially during the period. And when the police then went into the various homes with the search and seizures, they managed to get some of the food back, some of the groceries back that was stolen. But when we were told that actually that food is going to be destroyed because for the businesses and the companies, it doesn't make sense to have their products out there for so many people to have for free, because it's going to reduce the demand.
You see, and this is exactly the problem, that if you have a system or an economic model that would incentivize you to destroy food rather than give it to people, therein lies the problem. And I'm saying that's the role, actually, of legislation. That's the role of government, to be able to solve for those market failures. Because as we know, the market doesn't always solve things perfectly. If you look simply at the profits and losses line, of course your argument makes sense. But the reality is that we now know that we have a social problem that has to be resolved, and we have the ability to join hands with private food producers and the food market at large to help jointly resolve this problem. And of course, there's environmental benefits. Instead of food ending up in landfills and causing CO2 emissions into the environment, we could be using that food more productively. And I really am making an appeal to say, I think really it's time now to take it up a notch. This is not just about NGOs, who do great work, but as government, what are we actually doing about this? And I think legislation must now start to play a role.
Is this a private member's bill that we can expect from Horizon?
Well, I think something could be on its way, yes, and it's something that we have been working on. As you know, ending hunger has always been a top priority for us. It's something that we've engaged, so we are looking into it, yes. All right.
Just a quick final one, MEC. We speak about the cost of living, we speak about hunger, the cost of food itself, and now there's a VAT proposal, an increase, but at least we're expanding the basket of VAT-exempted products, especially food.
Yeah. So I think, unfortunately, the discussion has become very limited to simply VAT. There's obviously a broader discussion, which is saying, how do we fund South Africa Inc.? The reality is that we are not raising enough on the revenue side to be able to accommodate the needs of our people. But number two, is that even on the spending side, we're not doing enough to manage expenditure and make sure that what we spend, we are actually getting value for. So in my mind, and I think we've made statements to this effect, there's a number of things that need to happen to be able to resolve the challenge. The 0.5% VAT increase I'll almost say it's neither here nor there as a standalone initiative, because the reality is that we are just running out of money. And the choice is now between taking more debt, paying tax, or South Africa Inc. not being able to fund itself. Now let's talk about the tax line, like you're saying. Does it come in the form of a VAT, or does it come in the form of you, Eldrin, paying more personal income tax?
Are you ready? Personal income tax?
Are you ready to pay a bit more personal income tax? No, I'm saying these are the options on the table.
Okay.
Somebody has to foot the bill. And that footing the bill is going to come either from a few people like yourself paying a little bit more income tax, or a few companies paying more tax, or us shouldering that burden together. And I don't support a VAT increase, of course, but I'm saying we need to be able to engage those difficult choices and make them at the end of the day. So, yeah.